In high-ticket consultative sales, a company's greatest financial vulnerability rarely occurs when a deal is lost. It happens in the final moments of a deal being won, when invisible margin erosion eats away at profitability from the inside out. This chart visualizes the tightening reality of the 2025 UK B2B market. Average sales cycles have stretched to 6.5 months. Win rates for complex deals have dropped to 21%. Simultaneously, the cost to acquire a customer continues to climb. Yet in this highly compressed environment, firms actively surrender 15 to 20% of their gross margin right at the finish line. This is negotiation leakage, the direct result of unauthorized, silent discounting by representatives under pressure to close. Independent consultative firms and high-ticket property advisory groups operating out of major hubs like London are disproportionately exposed to this exact failure point. Much of modern revenue operations obsesses over top-of-funnel acquisition. Millions are spent tracking how a lead enters the pipeline, while the mid-funnel negotiation discipline required to actually capture value is largely ignored. Acquiring a highly qualified lead means zero if the business lacks the operational infrastructure to protect the margin of that deal in the final mile. Modern B2B sales teams operate under a bizarre technical irony. They have total conversational visibility, but zero real-time margin control. Legacy CRM platforms perfectly digitize transactions, tracking the administrative state of a pipeline, but they exist in an operational silo, completely disconnected from the live variables of a human conversation. Conversely, passive recording tools treat calls as historical archives. They record margin-destroying mistakes so a manager can review them during a coaching session 2 weeks later. They observe the error, but they do nothing to prevent it. This creates a forensic bottleneck. Founders and sales directors are forced into retroactive management, manually shadowing calls or skimming transcripts to catch qualification drift long after the contract has been sent. We call this the live intelligence gap. It is the fatal delay between a representative making a behavioral error, like offering a premature discount, and a manager recognizing that intervention is required. To survive in tighter regulatory and fiscal markets, revenue teams must abandon passive recording. They need active governance as code to execute commercial policy live, precisely when the revenue is at risk. Solving this requires a system architecture capable of mapping the semantics of a live conversation directly into machine executable policy. The first step is raw ingestion. The platform pulls unstructured audio and text streams directly from standard communication stacks like Zoom and Microsoft Teams, with zero latency. But raw data is useless without a perception layer. This is where the Revenue Quality Ontology, or RQO, engages. The RQO does not hunt for simple keywords. Trained on UK-specific negotiation patterns, it parses the incoming audio to determine the commercial state and strategic intent behind the words. For example, it easily identifies a simultaneous operations conflict. If a representative fields a request for a discount while failing to verify the buyer's budget, the RQO immediately detects the structural flaw in the deal. Without this layer, conversational AI is just a fast transcriptionist. With the RQO, the system possesses the commercial awareness required to govern a complex sale. Curious tone. Once the machine can read intent, how does it determine if that intent is actually dangerous to the firm's margin? It uses the behavior-to-outcome governance graph. This network maps hidden negotiation patterns against long-term profitability metrics. It captures the specific deal DNA of an interaction, tracing exactly which conversational paths lead to healthy retention versus which lead to early-stage churn. Effectively, this graph digitizes the founder's closing logic. It creates a mathematical benchmark of how the firm's highest performers anchor value and handle objections. This is entirely different from a rigid sales script. The system constructs a dynamic boundary of acceptable commercial behavior based on hard outcome data, allowing the representative to speak naturally within safe guardrails. By bridging the gap between an individual's behavior and the institution's deal health, the graph makes expert operational intuition verifiable. Let's apply this to a live simulation. Imagine a representative is on a call, attempting to discuss pricing before establishing the buyer's authority. This triggers the analytical engine, Negotiation Delta Diagnostics, or NDD. NDD instantly calculates the friction point between the firm's strict governance policy and the representative's live conversational drift. Using policy inference auto-calibration, the engine continuously refines its own alert tolerances. Managers do not have to manually rewrite rules every time the market shifts. Crucially, NDD analyzes this deviation before the contract is signed. It shifts the entire organization from a reactive posture to a highly predictive one. Identifying that behavioral divergence in milliseconds is the difference between stopping margin erosion live and conducting a post-mortem on a deeply discounted deal weeks later. How is this diagnostic calculation translated into an immediate physical intervention on the sales floor? Through the qualification-gated pricing engine. If the required qualification gates haven't been met, the system generates a policy-aware live prompt. It actively blocks the representative from committing to an unauthorized concession on the call, providing exact phrasing to guide the conversation back to value. This control mechanism also answers the legal stakes of modern UK B2B operations. The 2025 and 2026 Financial Conduct Authority Consumer Duty updates mandate strict evidence of fair value and suitability to prevent mis-selling. To meet this, the platform utilizes a refusal summary and intent clarification module. It forces representatives to accurately document buyer constraints on the spot, creating an auditable logic path that proves ethical selling practices. The execution layer turns regulatory compliance and pricing discipline from a retroactive administrative burden into an automated reflex. Theoretical architecture requires empirical proof. We deployed this system across 10 consultative firms in London for an 8-week high-intensity pilot. The immediate operational results were clear. Participating sites saw a 25% average increase in retained gross margin and an 18% reduction in qualification drift. There was also a significant secondary efficiency gain. By feeding new representatives live prompts, the time required to reach quota-ready proficiency dropped to just 12 days. This is a projected cash flow statement mapping these optimizations. Notice the net cash flow from operating activities row at the bottom. By eliminating negotiation leakage early, the operating cash flow scales rapidly and predictably from year 1 through year 3. This projected balance sheet illustrates how that institutional revenue equity impacts the overall value of the business. You can see total assets jumping aggressively across the same 36-month period. Live revenue governance operates as a financial engineering mechanism that directly stabilizes net assets and operating cash flow at the source. This solves the most existential threat to scaling an advisory firm: founder knowledge loss. When top performers or founders step away from the front lines, their intuition usually goes with them. The Copilot platform acts as a permanent digital clone of that elite closing intuition. It captures transient, individual street knowledge and encodes it into permanent, scalable, organizational revenue equity. Revenue intelligence is no longer about summarizing the mistakes of yesterday. It is about dynamically governing the margin of tomorrow. Without active governance infrastructure, your commercial policy is just a suggestion. Your margin is entirely at the mercy